Speaking of technology, I'm just happy that me and my brand new titanium knee made it up those stairs without falling. So thank you all for having me here. It's a real privilege. I think it's the third time I've spoken in this incredible facility. If you've not spent any time here, you need to spend some time in these facilities. It's good to be back in Georgia among friends. I call myself a Georgia boy, as was said. I grew up on the south side of Atlanta and went to Georgia Tech. And it's good to be home. My accent will change as I'm here. I will revert. There's not going to be a speech today. I'm sorry. I'm going to do what I like to call in front of an audience like this. I'm going to roll some grenades out on the table. They're going to go off, and hopefully that will kickstart our conversations. And I was just listening to what was being said, and I just want to share very quickly that I am really privileged to be asked by Senator Nunn to join his school at Georgia Tech in a part-time capacity. I love interacting with the students. I love being back on my alma mater, and yes, I wear my backpack and hump all around the campus like the students do. But I must tell you that Mr. Phil Breedlove of 1973 to 77 would not make it on this campus today. And as I come back to teach, frankly, in front of the students, and even more so in front of the amazing staff and professors of the Sam Nunn School, I often feel like a phony. I just work really hard to make sure I don't fail when I go into class, because these folks are so far beyond me when I was at Georgia Tech that it's scary. And I say this to introduce my next thought, which is, can you imagine how scary this is? They have just asked a knuckle-dragging fighter pilot to come talk to the world's probably best logistics and acquisition team about acquisition and logistics. Who dreamed that up? So today I'm going to try to bring a few points to set the stage, and then I'm going to basically drag two of my concerns and gripes out and throw them out to you so that maybe this team can help us forge through the problems that I will identify. In the early part of the education of Officer Breedlove, I went to to National War College in Washington, D.C. And one of the first things we learn there is the axiom that we often talk about, but fighter pilots never understand until they have a big command. And that is that amateurs talk about tactics and operations. Professionals talk about logistics. And the first time that I had to take a fighter group to the desert, I had a world-class PhD course in about 3 months of what logistics of moving a large flying organization was and getting ready for combat overseas. And ever since that time, I have more understood that it is truly the professionals that talk about logistics. Every single senior command, all 8 of them I had after that, I learned more and more that you get the logistics right up front. And I will bring this up in just a minute in my first couple of examples. So one more time, we are here, and I'm speaking in front of one of the very best teams of these kinds of professionals, and I hope to leave you today with a couple of worries and challenges. I think you all can propel us through these worries and challenges. And today's the day to start. So first I'd like to, many of you probably read a book called A Tale of Two Cities. I want to talk about a tale of 2 different campaigns. And I chose them because one I feel was a logistics success, and one was a logistics failure. And I want to draw some ideas from them and then leave you with some thoughts. The first one, which I think was an absolute logistics success, was Desert Storm 1. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through all the one-eaches of of the battles and how this all started. But I hope you will remember with me, those of you who are old like me, some of you young folks won't know this, but during that battle, during the preparation for the invasion of Kuwait and running Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait and back into Baghdad, and the build up to that fight, the predictions were doom, doom, doom. We're going to lose hundreds of airplanes and thousands of troops. General Schwarzkopf and his team took the challenge and moved out towards the enemy, meaning getting ready to fight. And the first thing he did, if you can remember, those of you, again, are logisticians and old enough, we moved a mountain of logistics to the desert. We set up the big holding areas, and it was incredible what we took forward to get ready to fight. And the whole world wanted Schwarzkopf to move quickly. And you may know him. He's a big old barrel-chested guy. He doesn't get pushed around easy. And he said, no, we're not going forward until my logistics plan is ready. And when it got ready, then he got ready to actually move out. It was massive. I want to just make a small plug for the fighter pilots. We were able to do that because it was a permissive environment. The air forces of the coalition, and a huge part of that, the U.S. Air Force, had not only given us air superiority over that battlefield, but we were given air supremacy over that battlefield, and we didn't have to worry about drones and airplanes flying in there and blowing up our logistics, or we could have never done that. So the operators and the fighters set conditions that allowed us to do the kind of logistics it was going to take to move forward. The operational success was amazing. Remember, they expected we would lose hundreds of airplanes just to take down the missile engagement zone over Baghdad, and we were expected to lose thousands of troops. We lost 4 airplanes. We lost more troops than you would want to, but it didn't amount to 100 in the first push. And they said it would take months. We essentially did it in 4.5 days. And the reason we could move fast and accomplish our objectives was because we got the logistics right, and our troops didn't have to wait or go short of anything they needed to fight. Now, it wasn't easy. There may be 1 or 2 of you that were in those rooms. You will remember we moved so quickly we almost outrun our exquisite logistical chain. But the logisticians made it happen and kept themselves abreast of the operational element that advanced. So I'll just foot stomp this one more time. I know my audience. The logisticians made that right. So let's move on to what I would call an abject failure. Before anybody panics, I'm not talking about us. But you may have witnessed this and thought about this across the last 3.5 years. I would say that the abject failure is the second invasion of Ukraine by Russia. The first invasion of Ukraine by Russia was on my watch. And that was back in 14, 15, and 16. And they invaded first Crimea, and then second the Donbass region of Ukraine. It cost them. That was hard for them. It took them years to get their act together and come back. But in 2014, in 2022, 2023, and 2024, they began the build-up again to attack back into Ukraine. They actually did a fair job of moving logistics forward and being ready to go into Ukraine. You would have to say, why did the world allow Russia to do that? We certainly had the air forces and other forces long-range strike forces from the Army and Navy, we could have attacked that formation and it would have never come across the line. And that's one of the challenges I want to leave with you. Exquisite logistics will not work if you don't have the policy to make them work. And one of the problems we had in the beginning of Ukraine is our policy was to give Russia sanctuary outside of Ukraine. There were lucrative targets that could have been struck, but because we were afraid of escalation in the campaign, we chose not to strike into Russia and hit this logistics before it came across the line. It almost proved fatal. The great and good news is that Mr. Putin didn't go to National War College. And Mr. Putin and his generals were focused almost completely on operations and tactics. And they were not focused on logistics. And also, I would say, we'll bring up the assumptions they made in just a couple of minutes. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Putin went crashing into northern Ukraine, and among other things, like really smart use of cracking open the dikes and letting water overcome the Russians and put them into a big mud bath, Russia started running out of materials. They were not prepared. Their troops actually moved pretty fast, all the way down along the west side of Kyiv and north and east of Kyiv and north and west of Kharkiv. But they fast began to run out of ammunition, supply, and fuel for their tanks and equipment. And so a huge invasion that was meant to take in one fell swoop Ukraine, in my opinion, failed for a couple of reasons, and the number one reason it failed was poor logistics. And so we see on the one hand, good logistics leads to success. On the other hand, bad logistics leads to a world superpower stalling against a very much third-level nation military in that war. So let's just highlight a couple of differences between these two. Once again, the fighter pilot is talking, so the first thing we're going to talk about is air superiority. Everything depends on our ability to defend our troops and make their operations safe, and that means putting air superiority not only over the troops, but over our logistics and our logistics routes and all of the things that get us in and out of theater. Mr. Putin went into North Ukraine and he did not have air superiority. What we thought at one point was the fourth best air force in the world still is unable to project air superiority over its own troops in Ukraine. The second thing I would like to talk about is the guts to prepare and the guts to wait until it's right. Schwarzkopf is the man. Everybody wanted him to crash forward, get moving. And he was stubborn enough, and I would say smart enough, to tell people we're not going anywhere until I know I can support my troops as they go forward. And even after that hard work and determination, again, the troops almost outran him. It was touch and go. If somebody's here that has personal experience with that, give me an amen, as they say in church. But time to prepare and listening to your logisticians on what they need is the difference between those two campaigns. And finally, I think the biggest failure by Russia is assumptions. This doesn't have a lot to do about logistics, but it made differences in the logistics. Mr. Putin was absolutely sure that this campaign was going to last 4.5 days, and then they were going to be having parades in Kyiv and greeted by open arms by their Slavic brothers and sisters. And so his logistics went a little bit something like this. Almost 10,000 of the troops that went into northern Ukraine Russian troops that went into northern Ukraine did not have kit in their backpack. They had dress uniforms to be ready for the parade. So when they needed their bandages, their dressage, their extra ammunition and so forth, what they had was their shiny helmet and boots. And so a logistical decision based on a bad assumption crushed their very own troops. Okay, I'm hoping I at least got the hooks and the logisticians in the room. Let me move to a second idea and the first of my sort of problems, worries, concerns, and things that I think this team is going to have to fight through to be ready for the current war. Sadly, we're not, I would say, and be ready for the next one. Hopefully, we don't have to have that, but we need to be ready. Something was sort of said peripherally a little while ago by the senator, which is prescient. I'm going to paraphrase you, sir, but basically the senator said, in order to avoid war, you must be prepared for war. Okay, and so our work to prepare is our deterrent and our avoidance. Right now, I don't think we're addressing some of the big structural problems we have to create that deterrent to avoid the next war. And one of the first things I will talk to is related to our acquisition corps and our logisticians. And that is, we can't do this alone. We absolutely are going to depend on the industrial military complex to go with us into this fight. What we're finding out right now as we try to help the Ukrainians, many nations, but certainly the United States, we do not have the industrial capacity right now to even help a nation at war adequately. And so how are we going to get beyond that? How are we going to empower industry to be ready and come alongside, especially in relation to surge capacity and excess production, we would call it. So bear with me for a short example. In an aviator's flying book, there are all these little things called notes, cautions, and warnings. And I think in the maintenance books it's the same thing, isn't it, guys? You got the same thing. Every one of those notes, warnings, and cautions are in the book because some poor soul did something wrong and got hurt or damaged an airplane or whatever. You know, and then we build into our manuals, don't do this because it'll get you hurt. Well, let me make a small play on words and say, I think that we have done this to ourselves as we relate to the military-industrial complex. In our past, we have to be honest, in our past, we have had men and women who are captains of industry and also were military handling captains of industry who did things that were either not intelligent or purposely nefarious in order to sort of pad their lining. Far be it from me to try to be holier than thou, but we have had people who have not been right. And so what has happened? In our laws and our regulations, we have built a shield to keep that from happening. And this is not wrong, but just realize that those notes, warnings, and cautions, they're not called that in the ITARs, but the bottom line is these warnings and limitations on industry now, trying to do the right thing, they very much limit us, and I want to hit my very specific point. We go these days and I'm going to use a specific example. I won't use the name of the company, but we went to a company and said, we need to double production on missile so-and-so. The company said, outstanding, first deliveries 2028. First deliveries 2028. basically, and those of you who are in Congress, and some of you are way smarter than me, you know, what we have said is to companies, if you use money from a contract that we have allocated to build this number of that, to start building excess capacity in your lines, that's against the law. We have limited what companies can do to create excess capacity or surge capacity by trying to do the right thing. And we've got to rethink that. Because right now we have industry that cannot surge, an industry that cannot surge, an industry that very much has to watch its P's and Q's when we need it to get busy and lean way forward. We want them leaning so far forward their noses are touching the ground, and they can't do that because of these regulations, notes, warnings, and cautions that we have built along the way. We have to figure out how to properly and with good oversight incentivize our nation's industrial capacity to come alongside of us. And if you think you could do that without money, I'm ready to listen to your ideas. But we're going to have to figure out how we turn that capability back on. Okay, I'm getting close to my time here. The third and final item. The organizers really wanted me to talk about some new capabilities and things, and I told a joke last night, the first time that Phil Breedlove stands up and lectures on blockchain, be ready for the great trumpet to go off, because these are not my strong points. But now I do want to talk about new things and new capacities and how we try to get them to the fight. And there's some GTRI people here. I'm famous for one day they asked me to come in and talk, and I was all hot and bothered because I had just come from Ukraine, where they were getting their fannies beat pretty badly by Russian electronic warfare. And the Ukrainians are actually pretty good at that, but the Russians were handing it to them. And so the team, and for you GTRI people, it was the Angry Kitten team. They said, talk to us about this business. And I said, well, this business is the United States now is either 4th or 5th in the world in electronic warfare. As a minimum, Russia, as a minimum, Ukraine, and as a minimum, Israel are out in front of us. There's one other country I won't mention that possibly is out in front of us. Oh, those guys. Now, I'm Georgia Tech, man. I'm actually on the board of GTRI. Their mouths erupted in volcanic fire. They were so mad. And basically, they said, we have the best technology and kit in the world. And I said, well, it's not in the field. And what we see is that Russia, Ukraine, and to a certain degree, even the Israelis, when they get something to about 80% right, they field it because they want their troops using it. And by fielding it, they put a stream of money behind it to produce it and have a program of record, and they get it out there so the war fighters can see it. We in America have invented something, some of you have heard this term. We call it the Valley of Death. It's where all great and good ideas go to die. We can create the best kit in Angry Kitten. Until we spend money on it and move it out of the labs and to the field, it is in the valley of death. And the likelihood of coming out the far side is something you've got to attack. I'm talking now to our legislative people and to local leaders and others. We've got to bring emphasis to getting capabilities to the field. I was with a team, I did a fellowship at MIT, and I was asked to come back up to MIT and talk about some of these very things. And I said this same thing at MIT. I said, you know, we're probably 3rd or 4th in the world in quantum computing. Oh, they were so mad at me. The meeting almost ended. We are the best in the world at quantum computing. And I told them, where is it and what is it working on right now? Oh, no, well, we haven't got it out of here yet. So it's the same thing. We run up against, we may be the very best in the world at developing capability, but we're not very good at getting that capability to the warfighter. And so I would ask you to help me with that. The Russias of the world are moving things to the front almost immediately, and we are learning from them because they are better than us in the field at electronic warfare right now, and I stand by those words. We may have the best in the world on the bench, but it's not in the warfighter's hands. So I'm close by apologizing for being a little brusque this morning, but I've left you with a couple of challenges that I think are important to the war fighters out there, the young men and women who are actually defending our country and our interests around the world. They deserve it. My daughter wears the colors of this nation. I don't want her going to war with the second best kit or the third best kit. I don't want a fair fight. We ought to show up with America's very best, and that ought to be the world's very best. Thank you for having me this morning.